we win over a new individual, a new leader, a new executive division every month, and that'll continue for the decade, I guess. From 2022 to 2030, I think that's how long it takes for a lot of these major financial institutions to rewire their thinking and their plumbing and their risk controls. By the way, we could complain about that or we could revel in it. The good fortune there is, if everybody completely rationally embraced this thing, Bitcoin would cost you $3 million a coin and you would lose, the next 20x.
One individual at a time, one business executive at a time, and one leader or head of government at a time. That's how Michael Saylor envisions Bitcoin's growth to becoming an asset worth over $300 million. The MicroStrategy CEO and co-founder explains that the process might be slower than expected, but it will be very rewarding for all investors who get in early. In a recent interview with Crypto Banter, Saylor outlines a time frame for the wider adoption of cryptocurrencies. He states that the action is already in motion, and over the next 8 years, between now and 2030, more institutions, sovereign funds, and countries will invest in Bitcoin, sending the asset's price skywards. Saylor also states that those who get in now before the wider adoption will get the most from the space. Let's hear the billionaire's views on the issue. But before that, ensure you smash the like button and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for your continued support and enjoy the video.
We're still in the stage of adoption where there is friction and there's prejudice and there is fear, right? There is. So I think we can all agree that there's still that, but the indicia, right? The indicia of institutional adoption and the likelihood that the institution and the establishment embrace this has never been clearer than it is today. Let's say it's going to be a 36-month, 24-month, 36-month, 48-month delay before banks catch up, but smaller banks are offering Bitcoin services. The larger banks, not yet, but Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, there are parts of those banks that are very reactionary and they push back. And on the other hand, another part of Morgan Stanley ends up owning $500 million worth of my stock, right? At the same time that the part of Morgan Stanley doesn't want anybody to buy your fund. And so these are, these are not monolithic conglomerates, right? These tend to be massive organizations with 100 different divisions, each of them making independent decisions. And you got to figure month by month, we win over a new individual, a new leader, a new executive division every month, and that'll continue for the decade, I guess. From 2022 to 2030, I think that's how long it takes for a lot of these major financial institutions to rewire their thinking and their plumbing and their risk controls. And what about? By the way, we could complain about that or we could revel in it. The good fortune there is, if everybody completely rationally embraced this thing, Bitcoin would cost you $3 million a coin and you would lose, the next 20x opportunity for you. So you almost don't want them to figure it out too fast, because otherwise you're the stupid money. I'd rather be the smart money and wait for the stupid money to learn over the course of 5 to 10 years, because we need someone to be buying this stuff when it hits $5 million a coin, Anthony.
In his interviews, Saylor states that the next categories of investors that will flock to Bitcoin are sovereign funds. He explains that they see the asset as another tech investment, and they have the funds and mandate to invest heavily. If sovereign funds like UAE, Saudi Arabia, Norway, and Switzerland invest in Bitcoin, Saylor believes that would pave the way for wider network adoption. The American entrepreneur and businessman also explains that the sanctions against Russia will force many countries to reconsider their export payment options. He adds that many of these countries will soon realize the benefits of using Bitcoin over other currencies like the US dollar and the Chinese yuan and commodities like gold.
I think the sovereign wealth funds will come first. I mean, the first adoption will be any sovereign wealth fund like, UAE or Saudi Arabia or Norway or Switzerland that would hold big tech stocks. If you would hold $10 billion worth of Apple or Google or Facebook or Amazon, I think some of those will roll into Bitcoin because it's just another tech investment for them, and it's totally within their mandate. I think that I think that some countries are being forced to consider other payment options. I mean, like the Russians are being forced. If you get kicked off of SWIFT, that drives and catalyzes something. And then I think, I think it'll be a while, but we're really waiting for a small, mid-sized company that has its own currency to print its currency and buy Bitcoin. I don't think it's a this year thing or a next year thing, but at some point somebody will figure it out. If you're selling $50 billion worth of commodities or exports every year, and you're using the dollar as your treasury reserve asset, you're propping up $100 trillion currency that's inflating at 10, 15, 20% a year. So that's just shipping. That's in essence shipping all of your treasury to the dollar over the course of a decade. If you switch that and you started buying CNY, you'd be propping up the Chinese currency. Instead of propping up $100 trillion currency, you'd be propping up a $20 or $30 trillion currency, and that's to the benefit of the Chinese. If you switch to gold, you would be propping up a $12 trillion currency, and if you switch to Bitcoin, you would be propping up a less than $1 trillion currency. So if people were rational, I don't think they are, by the way. Luckily for us, 98% of them aren't, because you couldn't be in the top 2% if everybody else was as smarter than you, could you? Right? So I guess they're not really totally rational, but if you were rational, the obvious thing to do if you're an export country is you start exporting in Bitcoin, and then you sweep your cash flows into Bitcoin, and then you probably make like 500 billion or $1 trillion because you did that. If you're the first mover, who will do that? Well, I mean, why wouldn't you do that, by the way? Why hasn't Apple bought $20 billion of Bitcoin and made $100 billion overnight yet? The answer is they're afraid, and they have political constraints. They're afraid of their shareholders. The accounting makes it ugly. So, you wonder, why don't they just bend over and make $1 trillion? Remember when I tweeted to Elon, I said, I didn't say buy $1 billion worth of Bitcoin. I said buy 10 billion worth of Bitcoin, and then issue $10 billion of converts and buy 10 billion more, and you make 100 billion, and then all the S&P follows you and you make $1 trillion. Well, he didn't quite do that, right? I mean, he did a little bit. I'm okay with the $1.5 billion, but the point is, why doesn't someone do a $25 billion buy at Google? And the answer is because of politics and institutional inertia. And, some people don't want the trillion. Okay, so why doesn't a government do it? Politics, institutional inertia. When will they do it? Well, that this is the butterfly effect, right, guys? It's like, how do you predict when someone gets whacked on the side of the head and knocked out of their comfort zone and decides to go and bend over and pick up the $1 trillion? I don't know, right? Like, my real point is, any of 1,000 people could do it, and maybe none of them will do it. But if you're betting that not a single one of them wants the $1 trillion, I mean, it seems to me like over a decade, somebody wants the $1 trillion. I just don't know who will have the courage and the clarity of conviction to do it.
What do you think of Saylor's interview? Do you notice how the business executive seems to become more confident and more entertaining to watch with every interview? With Bitcoin on the move back up, Saylor's personal Bitcoin holdings amount to almost $800 million. His company, MicroStrategy, also holds over $125,000. If the asset makes a 20 times increase at this point, Saylor will easily become one of the richest people in the world. Thanks for watching the video. Remember to drop your comments in the comment section below and give this video a thumbs up. A big thank you to all our viewers and subscribers. You are the best.